Hello, Sarah.
Hey, Louise.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Good. I'm doing good. I saw Pink over the weekend. I hung
How
out with some bio relatives.
That's exciting. And I know it felt really good, didn't
It
it?
did feel good. Yeah. And you got to see your son.
I too hung out with a bio relative, my
Yes, you
son.
did.
We had a really good time.
Yeah, it was a nice weekend for both of us. And then here we
Yeah.
are with not such a nice time. We're reading, of course,
Whew.
Barbara Bisantz Raymond's The Baby Thief by about Georgia Tan.
Before we get started, well, first of all, let's just say thank you to our sponsor, S1 to Freedom to F. I'm sorry, I messed that up, Jeff. S1 to F. Because we are going to have some exciting news to do with our sponsor and some stuff coming up. So stay tuned. In the next couple of weeks, you'll be hearing about this.
Sure will. It's
And in the meantime,
exciting.
you can check out his website. We put it in our show notes every week.
Perfect. I'm excited to hear what that may be.
Yes. So
Well, we're
here we
doing,
are.
yeah,
Yes.
chapter 5 and 6. So, boy, we got on and said hi to each other. We both said, heavy.
I know. It's really the chapter 5
Hmm.
is kind of a continuation on from last week's discussion. This is Billy. Whoever's following along, you'll remember Billy. And this Molly was his mother.
Yeah.
And he was kidnapped from her. Um, and she spent her whole life looking for him, never had any
Yes.
other children.
Called out for him on her deathbed.
Hmm.
I mean, it's
Just
heartbreaking.
tragic, tragic. So many of
Bill,
these stories.
yeah, Billy's the one that went looking because of the 60 minutes,
Hmm.
and started to remember the path he walked with his mother, the house they lived in, being with her. He started to have memories of it all. And I can't imagine the trauma he remembers being taken from her.
Hmm.
It's horrific. It's a really hard chapter to read, and it's part of our history. And this is how, the poor were treated and
Well,
taken advantage of by this woman.
and yeah, because when we get into her background, Georgia's youth,
Mm,
and how she came to do what she did, she just had it hammered into her head somewhere that poor people were bad and undeserving of children, and that
yeah.
no matter the circumstance, a child deserved a better life monetarily. That
Yeah.
was kind of like
Her
what she.
original thing in her head. Yeah. From her
Hmm.
family somewhere. I mean, they don't really know the conversations that led to that, but
Right. I thought it was interesting how Barbara, tried to go back
oh,
to Georgia's hometown of Hickory,
yeah.
Mississippi, and just like at one point someone pulled a shotgun on her.
Yeah.
And first people had agreed that they would talk to her, and then they just changed their minds.
By the time
So,
she got there, it was like the word had gone around. She had looked for eardrops in the pharmacy. She's in town. All of a sudden, I can't speak with you. I won't speak with you. She
and
felt
there was not
in
really much
fear.
of a explanation as to why. I mean, yes, the tight-knit community, not letting outsiders, but it almost seemed like, did someone tell them not to talk to her? That wasn't clear to
It
me.
wasn't clear. Well, and also just maybe she did mention that they were shamed by the reports that it made Mississippi and Hickory look bad. Things coming out
Hmm.
about Georgia Tan.
The only fame, the only claim to fame Hickory,
Yeah.
Mississippi had was Georgia Tan, who grew up wealthy. Her father was a judge.
Yeah.
Her mother was what, anything, school teacher
I
maybe,
think a school teacher
because
and
that
then
really women only had very
a couple
few
jobs.
choices. Yeah. Back then, school teacher, social worker. Social work was in its very infancy,
Yes.
which that couple, it was like a perfect storm for Georgia to become who she was, because social work was in its infancy, so
Yes.
therefore she could kind of dictate certain things. She was a domineering personality.
Yeah.
Um,
And she was definitely a lesbian. She had a
mhm.
friend who she lived with. It was kind of they kind of got into the history of that, which was interesting too, like how women could kind of be friends and live with each other. And she was just this hard-nosed person from day one, no empathy,
No empathy. And
cold.
also her, well, just her father's influence on her
Yes.
was so strong. Also, she had an adoptive brother. It
Yes.
wasn't really clear because birth certificates weren't kept up then, but it wasn't even clear. Was he older? Was he
I was,
younger?
yeah.
He was more frail, I know, and he was her mother's favorite child. So
Mm-hmm.
she was her father's, but her father also didn't approve of her wanting to he wanted her to be a pianist. She
She wanted
wanted
to be
to
a
do an
lawyer.
he wanted to be a lawyer. He wouldn't let that happen.
I
And
thought the lawyer part was interesting because she became so astute in the laws and how to
mhm.
skirt them. She would have been an excellent lawyer. And, maybe some of this would have been, I mean, this man had a huge control over her. It kind of, how we talk about sliding door moments. Here's a person who actually would have been an excellent lawyer, maybe a corrupt lawyer or a horrible person. But by saying, no, you can't be a lawyer with her gifted mind, she goes into social work and destroys thousands of lives.
I think, we talk about this of like what turns somebody into a monster, and it's,
Yes.
how you're born coupled with the nurture,
Mm,
right? So either one of these things on their own, maybe she wouldn't have become who she was.
yeah.
But because it sounds like her father was pretty unempathetic as well. He didn't
Yeah.
have any
Cold.
empathy. I think it said
Yeah.
cold and
Yeah.
so I think that combination really turned her into the monster that she ultimately was. She had no empathy. I thought it was interesting about the drugged baby though, that
Yes.
she it's for context, listeners,
Hmm.
she came into contact with a drug addicted baby that they brought home,
Because the mother was in an asylum.
was in an asylum. That's how they dealt with addiction in those days, just
Yeah.
throw them in an asylum. And many children also know
Went to
where
the
to put
asylum.
them, put them in an asylum.
Yeah.
Um, and it sounds like she got attached to that baby.
Something about that baby, which was interesting because she was attached to it. They had to give it away,
Hmm.
the baby away. And then that maybe sealed off her cold, like, I'm not going to feel anything. But later, do you find it interesting how she drugged babies?
Yes.
So I thought, that's the idea for that came right from what she witnessed, because in social work, she did witness this. And in her home, she saw, oh, I can silence this baby, the whole thing.
There were some things I highlighted
Yeah.
that were um like here it is. Georgia considered poverty the worst
Mm,
possible condition. It was her upbringing. She was from a snobbish family that looked down on people in those shanty houses who got their hands dirty for a living. Georgia felt she was taking children from trashy people and elevating the children. It was as if she thought, there's something that doesn't belong over here. I'll put it over there. But the thing that really was uh, kind of a cold water was the woman who believed the end justified any means may have considered the means warranted even when they killed a child. She
yes.
seemed undisturbed by the deaths of scores of children in her care. A child who died as a result of her social engineering would at least not have to grow up poor. And there
Yeah,
are
she thought that
always
was
more
better to be
children to
dead,
rescue.
better to be dead than poor.
Yes.
And these are, she found these things out by interviewing people who actually had conversations with her, who
Yes.
were friends at the time, like that news reporter. I mean, these are things she said. And the whole thing is so disturbing to me. She originally practiced, as we talked about, in Mississippi, and then she ended up getting the kaboot from Mississippi because she
Right.
stole some children from this
Yes, it was the
family.
one, it was the
Mm-hmm.
one woman that caught the attention of the community. She went on and
Yeah.
lured the woman was
Uh,
pregnant
yes.
outside, and then she lured the little 2-year-old that was sitting on the porch. She lured that 2-year-old and
into her
kidnapped him.
car. Yeah.
And then the mother, and then she got another one of their kids, and the
She
mother
took
was just,
another kid from
yeah,
the same family.
sued to get her children back, and it didn't work. She didn't get her children back, but it did serve to kind of make a bad name for Georgia.
Yeah, and then I felt bad for the state of Tennessee because her father had contacts in Tennessee and said, "Oh, we'll send her to Tennessee. She's such a good social worker."
Right.
And I wondered how she came to Tennessee, and it happened to be what we talked about before, that perfect storm of what was happening
Mm-hmm.
in Memphis at the time. I mean, it's so horrific that it makes me wonder, like, is there a greater thing going on in the world? Because it's so upsetting. Who would let these children, you know what I mean? It upsets me a lot.
It's and she's still not known out in the
No,
world, right? I mean, it's still I'll have to look into this. I'm not going to Google
no.
while we're talking, but I believe I heard they're making a movie
I think we did hear this.
out of this.
Yes.
So sometimes that's the only way to get that wider message out is through
And what
media.
a movie that will be
Mean.
to watch. Jeez.
Yes.
And well, here's one more thing about Georgia Tann I thought was she was still really into being like somebody herself,
Oh,
right?
right.
Because
On her deathbed,
yes.
she had and she had
Uh-huh.
like the pictures of Joan Crawford and June Allison, the people
With
who
fake
babies
signatures.
with fake signatures. By the way, I did that when I was young. I went to an Andy Gibb concert
Oh,
and took a picture from way in the back and
yeah.
then and then developed
Sign
the film and then took it
sign.
to school, signed to Sarah Love Andy in my like 13-year-old handwriting.
Oh, Sarah.
Like as if everyone would believe, like how okay, you have to get film developed. How did he sign it night of?
Oh,
Anyway, I get
I
the forgings.
I have a special spot for Andy Gibb myself, so I like you even more now that I know this.
Anyway, a light way to
uh,
end a dark chapter
yeah,
of
a dark
many,
chapter.
many more to come. Oh yeah, and she even had a card, a fake
Mm-hmm.
birthday card from Harry Truman that like
Yeah,
totally
so
fake,
random.
totally fabricated
But she needed that legitimacy, and I feel
in her own
may
mind.
in
I
her
mean,
own
no,
mind.
yeah.
No, and I feel that maybe you and I are doing our part to give her legitimacy now and show the world a little, more of the world what a horrible person she is. I hope that,
And how adoption,
yeah,
how she shaped what are still
still,
our archaic adoption laws. I'm
yeah,
going through this with the state of Missouri, like trying to get I'm probably going to have to go to court
yeah.
and file in court to get my records.
It's crazy. Even though
E-
your birth mother
Even though I
knew.
knew her,
Yeah,
my birth father's whole family knows about me. I met her. They're both deceased. It's just, yeah. So
we had
I'm at the mercy of a social worker, by
you
the
are,
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say. There's another woman we're friends with that was on our podcast who said that about California today.
Hmm.
It's like, come on, states, let's get it together.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Well, we are excited to have Allison coming up.
yeah, can't wait. Okay, see you soon.
See you in a minute.